I used to love The Bear, but now it's become a boring and self-indulgent mess. And let me tell you why. Number 1. Pacing. The Bear was a show known for its fast-paced storytelling, quick dialogue, and tightly written episodes. Every scene was packed with tension, contentious relationships, heated arguments, and clashing personalities. It was an adrenaline-fueled mess, replicating the chaos of running a struggling restaurant. That chaos was underscored with a constant sense of urgency, with every character scrambling to pull off some desperate scheme to save the business. The stakes were always high, and everything was constantly at a boiling point. I mean, just look at how this show opens. It's fast, it's loud, everything's moving, the characters don't stop, and the camera moves with them. Now that's not to say that the show didn't have its slower and more intimate moments. There were plenty of scenes where the characters had to stop and reflect on themselves and their lives. But in Season 4, that's all we're getting. The pacing, the tight narrative, the emotional explosions, it's all been dialed way down. And there are a few reasons for that, but the main one is the kitchen itself. Season 4 spent a lot of time outside the restaurant. This contrasts heavily with earlier seasons, where the kitchen was the heart of the show. Now it feels almost secondary. The pandemonium of the environment is mostly gone, and even when it is shown, the looming threat of failure isn't there to raise the stakes. Everything is quieter, calmer. That go-go energy that made the show so gripping, it's gone. In previous seasons, the Bear was always on everyone's mind. It was about what they could do to make the restaurant better. In Season 4, however, the characters are focused elsewhere. Carmy has fallen out of love with cooking and is emotionally removed from the Bear. Sydney is considering another job offer, Richie is either mad at Carmy or he's thinking about his ex-wife, and everyone else just fades into the background. The only characters with plot lines dedicated to the restaurant are Ibrahim, Tina, and this guy, who, even with a gun to my head, I could not remember the name of.
Who are you?
Sweeps. I guess his name is Sweeps. But even then, this guy's story this season is that he wants to learn more about wine. And then, he learns more about wine. Thrilling. Removing the restaurant as the main source of tension makes everything messy and less coherent as the main characters lack that central goal. I mean, sure, there's this timer that's set up at the beginning of the season, which is supposed to be this deadline for the restaurant, but it really fails to be of any consequence as everything is quietly resolved in the background. The Bear just starts to make enough money to keep going, which is only talked about once between Sugar and Computer. You don't really get the sense that the staff are really working better as a team, as the kitchen scenes are heavily reduced.
Oh, right, yeah, of course.
Of course, it would have been far better if we had seen the restaurant improve over the course of the season. Outside of episode 3, however, there's little insight as to how everything is functioning. Instead, we are only given glimpses of charts and graphs. Essentially, all the elements are in place for a good season, but the implementation of these ideas is horrible. The timer, the restaurant's deadline, and the poor state of the kitchen could have been a great platform for an intense narrative. But none of these ideas are brought to the forefront of the story. No one is rushing as there's no real threat of a looming failure hanging over the story like there usually is. Everyone is just focused on their own subplots rather than any central narrative. And without the tension and quick pacing, The Bear as a show is reduced to being a depressing soap opera filled with endless monologues and speeches. Which brings me to my next point. Number 2, dialogue. Now, like I said, there's a lot of long speeches in this season. And if there isn't just a straight up monologue, then there are these one-sided conversations that move along at a snail's pace with little to no resolution. Even the last episode of the season is just characters taking turns talking about their feelings. I mean, it's nice to see how these complicated characters feel at times, but the show used to do it in a much more subtle way. This is called subtext, which is the underlying meaning behind the conversation. The characters would say a lot about themselves through gestures, reactions, and subtle messaging. The first episode is a great example of this. Not once do the characters talk about how they feel, or take the time to explain anything. Information is just given to the audience through character interaction and natural dialogue. But now we are simply being told at all times what everyone is feeling, which makes things really boring because everything is just constantly being spelt out to us. This makes for a less interesting experience because there is nothing to figure out. Audiences aren't stupid. We like to think about what we watch. Mystery, intrigue, secret meanings, and such all give something for the viewer to chew on and mull over. Now, you may think I'm being dramatic and saying that there's a lot of monologuing here. However, you'd be wrong because I took the time to count the amount of monologues there are in this season, and there's at least 6. The shortest of these speeches is one from that random chick in Carmi's therapy meeting, which goes on for 3 minutes and 43 seconds.
Son of a bitch!
The longest, however, is from Jamie Lee Curtis, which clocks in around 8 minutes. 8 fucking minutes! That's about a third of the episode's runtime. Now, I'm not saying that all of these confessions aren't necessary or well acted, but there is no need to have to listen to this chick go on for almost 4 minutes about her drug addict brother when it has absolutely zero impact on the goddamn plot. You can really start to feel the emotional drag this show has created for itself. It's just all so depressing to watch.
I guess I should just shut the fuck up then.
Number 3. Stagnated Storylines. The main problem with The Bear is the plot, which has been stalling for at least 2 seasons. Just like the pacing and the dialogue, everything is slowed right down and it never gets to the goddamn point. For example, in Season 3, Episode 7, Sid is offered her dream job by Shapiro. This is presented as a huge opportunity for Sid, and it may be the most logical decision for her career, considering how poorly The Bear has been performing. Though, while it is a big choice for Sid, it ultimately falls flat emotionally due to the fact that she doesn't actually decide anything until episode 8 of season 4. That's 11 episodes of waiting for her to make a decision that is constantly being brought up to the audience. Sid keeps dodging phone calls and text messages from Shapiro, yet nothing really seems to push her to either go with this new job or stay at the Bear. It's more of a constant irritation rather than an interesting problem, as we are constantly waiting for a resolution. The show even dedicates an entire episode to this struggle, and there still isn't a result. Sid hangs out with a kid for a day, who conveniently has a parallel issue of her own. This makes Sid reflect on her own crossroads. We see her debating her choices, feeling emotionally vulnerable, and so on. We are even subjected to one of these monologues on how she feels about the entire situation. And at the end of the episode, it seems like she's actually made a choice to go with Shapiro. But in the very next episode, we are set right back to square one, where she is avoiding him all over again. And this is the kind of grinding storytelling that really brings the season to a halt. What makes the whole subplot even worse is that the conclusion is so underwhelming. There is no specific incident that drives Sid to stay at the Bear, she just ends up choosing to do so. Shapiro seems mildly disappointed, but there's really no consequences to her almost leaving the restaurant. In a show full of explosive arguments and confrontational characters, this huge decision fizzles out without any real issue. I mean, Carmi gives Sid a speech about staying at the restaurant because she's the heart of the team or whatever, but it's all pretty meaningless because she's already chosen to stay. So in essence, you have a plotline that takes over a season to resolve itself with almost zero payoff. And this is only one example, but there are plenty to be had in this show. Richie and Carmi's beef with each other literally goes on for 2 seasons, almost to the point where you kind of forget why they're fighting in the first place. It essentially just gives the writers ammunition to sprinkle drama into any given situation, because these two characters have an undefined relationship at this point. They are mad at each other, but then will randomly be buddies again, and so on. This also not only goes on forever, but like Sid and Shapiro, it also just fizzles out until the season 4 finale, where they finally resolve things. There is also the restaurant itself. In season 3, it's established that the Bear needs to get a positive review in order to stay afloat financially. If they fail to achieve this, then Cicero will pull the funding and the Bear will go under. This establishes an A or B scenario. Either A, the main characters pull through together and succeed, or B, they fall apart and lose everything. It's revealed that Carmi failed to get this positive review, and Cicero has to step away from the business. Instead of immediately falling apart, however, the Bear is then given a 2-month window to pull itself together. So the show essentially just resets the stakes from last season by giving the restaurant a new timer to work against, while also completely suspending the consequences from season 3.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
These narrative decisions make the story stagnant, as things take forever to resolve, and even when the plotline seems to end, it is instead recycled again and again, while all the tension is put on the back burner. Number 4. Too many characters. The Bear used to be a relatively small show. It mostly took place in one location and followed the story of a tight-knit group of characters. However, with every passing season, the show has brought in new characters, but at the same time, nobody ever leaves. This creates a bit of a Stranger Things situation, where there are a lot of likable cast members with little to nothing to do. Marcus, for example, is one of the most boring and useless characters in the entire show, and for some reason, the writers devote an entire subplot to his relationship with his father, and it goes absolutely nowhere. Like Sydney, he keeps avoiding text messages from his dad, who wants to reconnect with him. Marcus debates this for a while, but then decides to actually meet his father, only to walk away right before meeting up with him. This plot in no way serves the overall story, and is simply there to give Marcus something to do in order to justify his existence in this show, which is never a good idea. Besides that, he just sits there and looks mildly sad all the time. I mean, sure, he gets the award for being the best chef or something like that, but whatever, who gives a shit. They even drop the possible romance with Sydney and give it to Will Poulter's character instead, who is also just kind of there. I mean, I like Will Poulter, and I think he does the best with what he's given, but let's be fair, we still almost know nothing about this guy. He has a pre-existing relationship with Carmi that is never explored, and again, he doesn't do anything for the plot either.
Get the fuck out of here. You're done.
Ibrahim gets a whole subplot to himself this season, which actually ends up involving the restaurant. However, he's so on his own that it feels like a complete side quest from the rest of the show. The storyline as a whole is fine, but it's mostly there for comedic value more than anything. However, it looks like the payoff will be in season 5, so I'll wait to judge this plotline fully. Then of course there's fucking Sweeps. Or Greg, or whatever the fuck his name is. You want to talk about the definition of useless? Then the best example would be this character. This is someone who has been in the show since the first episode, yet we never get any real information about him. He's just always in the background. Suffice to say, Sweeps never does anything for the plot, and this season is really no different. Just like Marcus, he's just given something to do, which is becoming a wine connoisseur. And sure, that would have worked better had the season story been all about fixing the restaurant, but since that's almost nobody's goal this season, Sweeps' plotline just gets kinda swept to the side. Not to mention Garrett and the other Asian guy, who also do nothing this season except have a few funny moments with Richie. But even then, they're also just in the background. Then of course you got Marcus's friend, who I'm not even going to bother looking up the name of because he's boring and naturally pointless because he's tied directly to another pointless character. So yeah, you get the point. There are plenty of empty suits in this show now, and it's really starting to overwhelm the screen time. There simply isn't enough for all these characters to do, and it would simply be best if they pulled a Grey's Anatomy and had someone get hit by a fucking truck or something. Now this issue with too many characters also affects how they work together. When the cast was smaller, there was a lot of time to see them grow as a team and become a big family.
We're all a big family here.
But in The Bear Season 4, there isn't enough time for anyone to really shine, and we also just flat out don't see the same character interactions that made the show great in the first place. Tina is a great example of this missing component. While initially rough around the edges, Tina quickly became the wise old sage character for many of the people in The Bear. So Tina's lack of emotional guidance for characters like Sid or Richie this season leaves a huge hole in what was once a natural dynamic of their group. And that's not the only relationships that are being ignored in this season. As I pointed out before, we never really get to see Sid or Marcus interact, Cicero and Carmi, or Richie and Carmi, and so on. Also, did it not bother anyone on how this whole subplot with Sid's father was handled? Her dad has a heart attack, which everyone in the show quickly becomes aware of, but no one seems to give a single shit about it? I mean, there's this look of mild concern, but it's all overtaken by these comedic arguments about petty relationships. No one ever goes to visit Sid, no one goes to the hospital, nothing. Richie offers to send a gift basket, but that's about it. These people are constantly going on about how they're a big family.
We're like a big family here.
Yet when Sid's actual family is in trouble, they do nothing to help her. It's just so out of place in terms of the tone of the scene and the actual character development. Carmi literally says in the last episode that Sid has people here that would jump in front of a bus to save her, but that's kind of difficult to believe when they barely take the time to worry about her dying father. It would have been so much better had Carmi decided to shut down the restaurant so they could all go be with Sid at the hospital. This would have showed the family dynamic while also making Sid's decision to leave the bear all the more difficult. Maybe the emotional pressure would make her confess her decision to leave the bear. Or maybe this kindness would also be the reason she decides to stay. But nope, instead we get this long-ass monologue about Sid's feelings while everyone acts completely disconnected from the situation. The point is that many of these prominent relationships don't get any attention, which adds to this odd feeling in the show, where the components that got us invested in the first place are no longer there to carry the story. Which brings me to my last point. Number 5. I used to love this show. Now, despite my rants about how far this show has fallen, I want to establish that I actually used to love this show. I binged the shit out of season 1 and 2, and that dinner scene is still one of the most intense and chaotic sequences I've ever watched on television. But the utter lack of teeth and grit this show has now has essentially ruined it for me. I think the bear's biggest problem is the lack of identity. On the whole, it just feels like the writers have forgotten what this show was really about. Most of the characters have no real motivation or drive, which makes everything feel really dull to watch. Nobody really seems to know what they want, and so the plot doesn't go anywhere. And oh my god, the season is so fucking sad all the time. It feels like I'm being punished for watching it, and I can already hear the Bears defenders. They're gonna say that the slow pacing is a way for the characters to be more reflective, and it represents their healing from all the trauma they've suffered or some shit like that. But the thing is, I don't fucking care. That's not what I signed up for. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this was a high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled, fast-paced thriller that kept me on the edge of my seat. You can have the characters healing and complete their arcs without ruining the show's pacing, and I think that I've proven that here. And that's not to say that the acting isn't fantastic, it is. The performances by Jeremy Allen White, Eben Moss Backrack, if that's how you say his name, and Io Edeberry are strong, but great acting can only take you so far, especially if you don't have a good script to back you up. So no, I'm not going to suck this show's ass because it used to be awesome. Hopefully season 5 can bring things back around again, but they really need to make some huge adjustments if they're going to make things work. But in any case, I'll be there to watch this show either rise or fall, and I really hope it isn't the latter. So that was fun. I want to thank you all for listening. If you like this video, then let me know down in the comments section. And hey, if you like my content, then please hit the like and subscribe button, or become a member of the channel. And like always, I'll see you on the next one.
Have you ever met Miss Lindy? She's a gal with the bright red hair. Now she stands high from all the rest. You know her anywhere.